So I will try to fill in as best I can. So good evening. Welcome to the Caldwell-West Caldwell Board of Education Public Conference Meeting on Monday, September 30th, 2024. Today the board met in private session at 6 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss personnel, litigation, miscellaneous, and old business matters. This meeting has been advertised and is in compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act and NJSAA 10:4-6, aka Sunshine Law. The matters discussed will be made public when confidentiality is no longer required, and formal action pursuant to said discussion shall take place only at a meeting to which the public has been invited. It is 7:02, and we're going to start our public conference meeting in the cafeteria. The Board of Education meeting will be streamed live. All community questions and comments will be welcomed in person. The Caldwell-West Caldwell Board of Education public conference meeting is compliant with the Open Public Meetings Act and NJSAA 10:4-6, aka the Sunshine Law. Notices have been sent to the Progress, Caldwell, New Jersey, the Star Ledger, Newark, New Jersey, and Tap into West Essex. Notices have also been posted at the Board of Education Business Office, Harrison School Building, Gray Street, West Caldwell, New Jersey, and have been delivered to the Clerk, Borough of Caldwell, and Clerk, Township of West Caldwell for posting. So to open the meeting, Brian, can we take the roll?
Yes. Student Representative Isabella Parathath.
Here.
Ms. DiMartini.
Here.
Ms. Landolfi Jefferson.
Here.
Ms. Mack.
Here.
Mr. Diambola.
Here.
Ms. Grosso. So we have 4 voting members present. We have a quorum.
All right, can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brian, any communications?
There were none.
The superintendent's report.
If everyone could just take a note, we're going to have a meeting on October 21st, and then we're going to skip a week and do November 4th. So the next 2 meetings are October 21st and November 4th. And then, Board President, Board Vice President, I have a brief statement to read.
Yes.
After careful consideration and deliberation, I've decided to not request a renewal of my contract as superintendent. I have already informed the board of my decision and wanted to make this public now so that the board has ample time to find my successor. This choice comes after a rewarding and meaningful experience with the district. I believe the time has come for me to pursue new opportunities and for the district to transition into the next chapter of leadership. Serving as a superintendent has been an honor. I am grateful for the trust you have placed in me, the support and dedication of our staff, and the ongoing collaboration with the board and the community. Throughout my time here, we have navigated challenges, celebrated achievements, and strived always to be the best, to do things in the best interest of students. While I will not be seeking a contract renewal, please know that I am fully committed to continuing my work throughout the remainder of my term, ending June 30th of 2025. In partnership with the board and administration, I will work towards a successful referendum and help to ensure a smooth and seamless transition as the district identifies new leadership. Please know that I remain dedicated to the success of our students, staff, and the entire school community. Thank you once again to the board, to the staff, and the community for your partnership and for the opportunity to serve this wonderful community of Caldwell and West Caldwell. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Caldwell.
Thank you, Doctor. And I guess just to kind of piggyback off that, what our plan is going to be is over the next week or so, we are going to schedule or talk to the principals of each school to schedule times and dates that we can go in as a board or in committees to discuss with the staff, with the teachers, with the principal, and also with the community, kind of what the next superintendent should look like. And then our plan is to kind of hit all the schools and central office, hopefully before the Thanksgiving holiday and put together a job description where most likely will be posted around Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving, and then move on to the next phase. And as we go through the process, obviously we're going to keep everybody up to date, and each board meeting will have updates as we go. All right. May I have an approval? We have no committee reports, right?
No,
And may I have an approval of minutes?
I'll approve the minutes.
Second.
I'll second.
Brian?
Ms. DiMartini,
Yes.
Ms. Landolfi Jefferson,
Yes.
Ms. Mack,
Yes.
Mr. Diambolo.
Yes.
4-0, motion carried.
So we're going to I know we have Greg here to do our referendum update, but we were kind of going to go through the agenda, so this way we can kind of give the floor to him. So this next section is just going to be comments on agenda items, and then any comments about the referendum we can address to Greg at the end. So public comments on agenda items only. Public comments shall be governed by the following. Participants must be recognized by the proceeding officer and must be prefaced comments by an announcement of their name and address. Statements are limited to 3 minutes in duration. Participants may speak no more than once on the same topic until others who wish to speak on the topic have been heard. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. Boards use the public comment period of the meeting as an opportunity to listen to citizen concerns, but not to debate issues or enter into a question and answer session or a cross-examination between the public and individual members. Beware that not all issues brought before the board meeting will be resolved that meeting. Boards may respond to public comments by seeking additional information or by delegating the authority to investigate the issue to the superintendent or his or her designee. The presiding officer may interrupt, warn, and/or terminate a participant's comments if it exceeds the allotted time or is objectively obscene. Participants may be civilly liable for any obscene, defamatory, or slanderous statements made during public comments. So with that being said, do we have any comments on agenda items only? No?
For Greg.
All right. So then let's do our voting. Curriculum and technology.
Okay. Upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, motion to approve items A through I under curriculum and technology on this evening's agenda.
Second.
I'll second.
Brian, can you take the roll?
Ms. DiMartini,
Yes.
Ms. Landolfi Jefferson,
Yes.
Ms. Mack,
Yes.
Mr. Diambolo.
Yes.
4-0, motion carried.
Personnel.
Okay. Upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, motions to approve items A through I under certificated staff and items A through F under non-certificated staff and personnel on this evening's agenda.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Brian, can you take the roll?
Yes, Ms. DiMartini,
Yes.
Ms. Landolfi Jefferson,
Yes.
Ms. Mack,
Yes.
Mr. Diambolo.
Yes.
4-0, motion carried.
Finance and facility.
Upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, motions to approve items A through L under finance and item A under facilities on this evening's agenda.
And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Brian, can you take the roll?
Yes, Ms. DiMartini,
Yes.
Ms. Landolfi Jefferson,
Yes.
Ms. Mack,
Yes.
Mr. Diambolo.
Yes.
4-0, motion carried.
And policy.
Upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, motion to approve item A and B under policy on this evening's agenda.
And the second?
I'll second.
Brian?
Yes, Ms. DiMartini,
Yes.
Ms. Landolfi Jefferson,
Yes.
Ms. Mack,
Yes.
Mr. Diambolo.
Yes.
4-0, motion carried.
All right, so now that that's taken care of, I guess we're going to open the floor to Greg.
Okay.
Turn on the computer. So good evening. My name is Greg Somjan. I am with the architectural firm of Perrette, Somjan Architects. I'm one of the founding principals. We have been working with the school district now for several months in preparation of presenting a referendum to the community in March of 2025. I made this presentation at one board meeting already. We've attended all the back-to-school nights to answer questions when they came up. There were a few that we added some slides to the end for the purposes of starting the frequently asked questions list that we will work with the district to distribute so that the information that is being disseminated is accurate and addresses the questions that are coming up. So the first question is, why now? Why is the district pursuing a referendum? So the district is pursuing a referendum primarily because of a need, but also because the opportunity that is presenting itself for question number one, which I'll get into a little bit later, is there is debt rolling off, meaning the district is coming to the end of a bond that it had from many, many years ago, and there's an opportunity to just roll that over to undertake much needed projects, coupled with an opportunity through the state of New Jersey to secure debt service aid. And so as a result, many of the projects that we are going to be presenting tonight and that will be presented to the community in March will have no increased tax. So the taxes that someone is paying today will be the exact same amount that they will be paying post-referendum on question number one. Question number one consists of what we call infrastructure projects. They consist of every school being touched in some way. At the high school, there will be the introduction of a new security vestibule. The existing wood shop and computer spaces are going to be gutted and converted into a more modern STEAM lab that will maintain a modernized wood shop, architectural engineering type computer spaces, robotics and 3D printers, and everything that's customarily associated with STEAM. And as part of the first question, the gymnasiums will also get heating, ventilation, and air conditioning upgrades. At the middle school, again, there are going to be security vestibule upgrades where some additional elements will be incorporated. The stairs that exist, including the fire escape, will be repaired and or replaced. Again, many of those things are at their end of their useful life and ultimately do need to be addressed. There is also heating pipes that run throughout the building that are also at the end of their useful life and will be replaced to ensure that heat is maintained in the building when it's needed. And then here again, the gymnasium will get heating, ventilation, and air conditioning upgrades. At the elementary schools, there's a pretty consistent set of improvements that are being proposed. In the areas where vestibules exist, we will be doing some upgrades, perhaps some additional camera work and things of that nature. And then in each of the elementary schools, one of the existing spaces will be upgraded to introduce STEAM at the elementary school levels. And the goal at the elementary schools is that these projects will be smaller in scope, but they will include accommodations for 3D printers and things like that, with the goal that as each student progresses through the district, the areas that they will get exposed to will be more modern, more technologically driven, and by the time they get to the high school, they will be seeing collegiate level spaces so that as those that do go to college transition, they will be accustomed to and comfortable with it. And for those that might go into the trades, the wood shop will help that transition as well. At Lincoln, we are introducing a security vestibule where none exists. We're looking at some renovations to the main office and classrooms. Again, we're looking at some media center upgrades to allow for the introduction of some STEAM-related space. There are flooring throughout the building and facade repairs, and there are some pipes that are below the slab in the boiler room that will be replaced and repaired. At Washington, again, some security vestibules and media center upgrades to create a STEAM space. At Wilson, some security vestibule upgrades and media center upgrades at this, that are related to STEAM. And then just to give people a flavor of what we're talking about, these are images from other projects with which we've been involved. They're at the high school and elementary school levels. The projects post-referendum will be spoken about in greater detail with the teachers, with the principals, to really drill down on exactly what is needed for this district. But you can see at the elementary school levels, introducing color, introducing an area for 3D printers and Lego type systems that are used will be introduced. And then at the high school level, things like robotics and all the stuff that are customarily related to a STEAM space to allow the students to start to acclimate towards college or the real world. So that's what will be housed in question 1, and that is the question that with a focused effort, we backed into a dollar amount so that what will be presented to the community members in March will have no tax impact. So again, because the debt is rolling off, because we have applications into the Department of Education, the next step for them is to review those and submit what are called preliminary eligible cost letters. That will tell us what dollar amount they're going to contribute. We expect up to 34%, so 34 cents on the dollar we are expecting for the question 1 projects, with the goal of being $0 impacting the taxpayer. Because the district is presenting the referendum in March, and that's to coincide with the debt rolling off, so the timing of this is critical. They also felt as though there was a lot of talk between the high school administration and the athletic director and the coaches and the like, that the field house, which I'm led to believe is open for tours this evening, so if you have a chance, I urge you to visit it if you have not. The existing field house is old. Not only are the systems in there outdated, but the building is primarily used for one sport, and there are a host of challenges that are associated with it. So the building itself, for those that are not familiar, sits adjacent to the existing turf field, and it is on the other corner from the concession stand. It is a 1-story building with a footprint of approximately 3,000 square feet. There are a couple of locker rooms that are used primarily by football in the fall. There are 2 single fixture restrooms, one on either side, and some porta-johns. So if you've ever attended an event here, I'm led to believe during conversations with a variety of people, including back to school, that many people at halftime just chose to drive home to go to the bathroom because either the lines were very long or the facility is just not really ideal. So when you have a large crowd, similar to a theater event in New York City, you have large crowds getting out at the same time before halftime or afterwards. The events are overcrowding the restrooms, and so that's another deficiency in the space. So through discussions with coaches, athletic directors, getting feedback from a whole host of people, the proposal is to increase the footprint of the building from approximately 3,000 square feet to just under 8,000 square feet. And I will go over the specifics. You can see on the site plan drawing here, it's not a view that many are accustomed to seeing, but between the field and the track, you should be able to understand the area we're talking about. The blue represents the new footprint. The gray represents sidewalks and community areas around that. The green area represents a code requirement that has to do with stormwater management. And then as a result of the footprint increasing, we do have to move some of the field events a little bit. And so the shot put and the discus, which currently exist, might be shifted a little bit, while the practice field behind the bleachers will continue to be used. The plan is probably a little bit difficult to see from afar, but let me walk you through it. On the left side is the first floor. The blue represents team rooms. So while today there are only 2 primarily used by the boys and no room for the female athletes, this facility will now be equitable and comply with something known as Title IX. So on the top, at what I will call 12 o'clock, the blue represents 2 team rooms that will be used by the male athletes for the fall and spring seasons. The 6 o'clock blue area will be 2 locker rooms used by the female athletes in the fall and the spring. Each will have its own set of restrooms for the individuals, and then the yellow mustard color in the middle are new public multi-fixture restrooms. Not only will they be cleaner, and there'll be a line that is much shorter. Wow. So the lines will be shorter, the space will be cleaner, and the space will be ADA or barrier-free compliant. So I know that grandparents come to graduations, people come that are physically disabled, either in wheelchairs or in other types of limitations. These new bathrooms will be fully compliant, as will the building. We also introduced a family gender-neutral bathroom towards the back. So if a mom or a dad needs to change a baby, they can do that, not necessarily in the main restroom. The white areas are circulation, including stairwells and elevator, and then the green on the left plan represents a remote trainer area. There is a trainer's space in the high school today. This will be a remote trainer's area so that the trainer can be near the athletes that are out on the field, whether that's male athletes or female athletes, whether that's football, soccer, lacrosse. Having the trainer out there in case of an emergency was something that was requested in the document. On the second floor plan, which is the drawing to the right, there was active discussion about a second floor at all, but it was decided that a second floor should be presented to the community. The space on the second floor is a multi-purpose space. So it will be used for a host of different things, including the male and female athletes. It could include people getting together for band or music purposes if they need a meeting room. It also is going to be used for professional development. So there's always professional development going on throughout the district. There is testing, SAT, AP testing. This building will be fully air conditioned, so the space on the second floor can also be used for that. And then, of course, the district also has spoken to town representatives on both Caldwell and West Caldwell, and community use through requests will also be accommodated in the building. The purple is a conference space on the second floor as well, just to create a smaller breakout area for perhaps 10 or 20 people. And then the yellow around the perimeter is the much needed storage, whether that includes athletic uniforms that are out of season or the tables for the multi-purpose space. This is a rendering just to give you a flavor of what the building might look like. Again, it's 2 stories totaling approximately 16,000 square feet, and is intended to be created so that the community can be proud of the building that is going to be proposed. So just to talk about the finances again, there are going to be 2 questions. One of the things that we heard at Back to School Nights was, because the field house is certainly a hot topic on social media, and because the district hasn't put together frequently asked questions yet, people didn't even realize there was a question 1. And so question 1 is the infrastructure project that I presented. There is no tax impact. They are eligible for what we call debt service aid from the state, and because the debt is rolling off, the timing is perfect, and the district does have some capital reserve that they'll be contributing to these projects, which is what will keep these projects without a tax increase to what is being paid today. And then separately, there will be a question 2 to address the field house. And the field house right now has a total budget of approximately $15.4 million. And again, it's being submitted to the Department of Education for review. We don't expect, based on its use, that it will be eligible for any debt service aid. But again, the Department of Education has surprised us, so we'll see what happens. If the $15.2 or $15.4 million is calculated based on the financial calculations that are being done today, the expectation is approximately $140 on the average assessed home. The Board of Education has talked at great lengths about this, and they are considering subsidizing the field house by using some capital reserve. One of the numbers currently being discussed is about $2 million to contribute to that project. By bringing that down to $13.4 million, which would be borrowed, similar to a mortgage for 20 years, the annual contribution from the local taxpayer would be $129 annually on the average assessed home. Few frequently asked questions that we encountered both at Back to School Night and elsewhere. If there's no greater tax impact in question one, why am I having to vote? Legally, anytime a Board of Education or public entity borrows money for more than 5 years, in this case it will be a 20-year note, just similar to the one that is rolling off and similar to a mortgage. When you have a large amount of money being borrowed, you have the benefit of borrowing it for a long time. Anytime that happens, the community must vote. So even though question number one is no greater tax impact, the community must vote on it. One would think it's a no-brainer, but I don't want to speak for the community. But obviously, the projects that were looked at and consciously talked about by the board were incorporated into this question because they are needed, right? So hypothetically, if the question fails, even though it's no tax impact, the piping at the middle school will need to be replaced. Otherwise, there will be no heating system in the school. Another question that came up is, when will I be asked to vote? This will be presented on March 11th, 2025. It's a Tuesday. By then, you will know exactly the Department of Education's response to us. We will know exactly the subsidy that they are proposing, and you will have all the information before you go into the booth. How many questions are there? Again, based on the Back to School Night, we were surprised that people didn't realize there was also a question one. There are 2 questions that are going to be on the ballot. As I stated, question 1 is the infrastructure, question 2 on the field house. This question I get a lot, and we got it again. My house/private projects do not cost this much. Why is this the case? One of the primary differences, and the reason you cannot compare apples to oranges, is because public entities are required to pay prevailing wage rates to the contractors. That is the equivalent of what many of you might know to be union rates. So you don't have to be a union contractor to bid the project, but even if you are a non-union contractor, the law requires you to pay prevailing wage. That is one of the primary drivers for the costs of a public sector project. I know it's hard to believe, but I often get people coming up to me saying, I'm in real estate and I just built multifamily homes at a fraction of this price, or I just did a renovation at my home. The numbers you're presenting are outrageous. I assure you that the numbers are very much in par, and once the referendum passes and we go out to bid, our goal obviously is to be conservative. So by way of example, our budgets do include contingencies. If the contingencies are not needed or not used, then they will not be used and given back to the taxpayer. If there are market escalations, we've accounted for those, because the March referendum, once successful, we still have quite a bit to do to finalize drawings and get out to bid. So the projects won't probably start until 2026. So again, we've taken these things into consideration because we know that, especially since COVID, the cost of construction in the public sector especially has gone up. And if you've done any work on your homes and even went to buy a piece of plywood or some flooring to redo it, you would probably realize how much things have gone up over the last several years. How is it that question 1 does not impact taxes? Again, I mentioned this earlier. This is a combination of debt rolling off that the district is already paying, as well as the debt service aid that we will be eligible for through the state. And then another favorite, which is this field house just for football? And the answer is no. This field house was not just for football, and in fact, the board and the administration and the school team that was involved were very conscious about addressing this. So some examples. Female athletes will now have 2 team rooms and separate restroom facilities. Male athletes will now have 2 team rooms and separate restroom facilities. So lacrosse, baseball, not just football, can be accommodated. Multi-purpose spaces can be used by both female athletes and male athletes. other school programs as deemed necessary, professional development, requisite testing, and obviously community use. The building is intended in its design to make things equitable between the male and female population, to improve the circumstances for the community, and even something like physical education. If the physical education programs are happening out on the turf field or around the track, you have a couple of restrooms out in that building, and I'm not even sure if the students are coming back to this building to go to the restroom, where having something like this will make it much more convenient, not only for monitoring the students, but obviously giving them a safe place to go. And then obviously making the building code compliant, upgrading it not only in restrooms, but in ADA and barrier-free compliance was certainly one of the goals of the design. That concludes my presentation. I don't suspect any of you have any questions for me, so I bid you adieu. No, I'm just kidding. Dr. Conklin is getting the microphone, and if you raise your hand, he will come around, and I will stay here as late as I need to answer every question, whether to your satisfaction or not.
All right, so I am just going to reread the rules for the public comments. So again, board use public comment meeting at board use the public comment period of the meeting as an opportunity to listen to citizen concerns, not to debate issues or enter into question and answer sessions or cross-examination between the public and individual members. Beware that not all issues brought before the board will be resolved at this meeting. Boards may respond to public comments by seeking additional information or delegating the authority to investigate the issue to the superintendent or his or her designee. The presiding officers may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's comments if it exceeds the allotted time and/or is objectively obscene. Participants may be civilly liable for any obscene, defamatory, or slanderous statements made during public comments. All
Okay,
right, so
Dr.
questions?
Conklin. I think the lady in the brown shirt.
Good evening. My name is Sharon DeMeo-Mudis, and I preside at 231 Westville Avenue, West Caldwell, New Jersey, and I'm right next to the field house. So I have some real concerns.
Okay.
The first concern is you talked about a basin, and I don't think people really realize the amount of water we get, and it's a huge problem. That small basin, in my opinion, will not cover it. Can you explain the water system that you plan on putting in? Because currently, Caldwell, I believe we go from an 8-inch pipe to a 4-inch pipe in West Caldwell, and I cannot tell you the amount of money I've spent to keep the water outside of my house.
It's a great question. So first, the detention basin is intended when you talk about code and the Department of Environmental Protection's requirements. We are not permitted to have more water run off our property than does today. So the basin that is being designed is not intended to cure the ills of Caldwell-West Caldwell.
I understand.
They are intended to accommodate the increased building size and to keep the water on the property, to detain it long enough for it to percolate into the stormwater system in a manageable way. At this early stage, we've run rough calculations to give us an approximate size, but post-referendum, there will be an elaborate design exercise, and we will be engaging the town engineer. As you are aware, our property is actually downhill from yours. So most of the water that you're encountering is coming from the other side down the street into the stormwater system. And so, again, this basin is not intended to resolve the issues that are coming down the street and from other areas, which I can appreciate you would be encountering. And we've talked to the not just the town engineer, but the sewage department, because there is what's called a moratorium, and you can't build more housing or projects that are going to increase the flow because they have a freeze. Because we're an existing building, it's the same population that will be using the field house as is using the school, so there won't be an increased flow into the sewage system. That's what's permitting this project to go. But we are going to be very conscious about the design of that system to ensure that it's being detained and retained on the property before it percolates into the system. Unfortunately, the existing pipes that the community has are outside our purview and outside the school district's purview. That's really a town issue that they would have to address, that it's not something we can address.
Can I just add something? I don't know what the
Sure,
rules are.
please.
So I guess part of my concern is the Board of Education owns property behind my house also.
Correct.
So because they have not, because that water runoff is huge, number one. I'm really concerned with, we're adding a second floor, and you're talking about using it more. And with the amount of water we're getting, I still am extremely concerned. And the use of a second floor, just out of curiosity, don't we still use the school to do testing for SATs and ACTs? Are we now going to not be able to use the school building for that, and we're going to be using a second floor of a field house for that? I'm a little confused.
So I'll address your 2 points of the question. We are very aware that the board owns a piece of property. It's almost like a little nub that sticks out and that goes behind
My
your
house,
property,
yep.
which is next door. We're not touching that as part of this project, so it won't be regraded, nor will trees be knocked down. So if there are challenges with that property today, that is certainly something that you should articulate to the board, and that should be a separate conversation.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yep, but listen, I think, if there's a property that's adjacent to your home owned by the Board of Education, I think that's a conversation. It won't be impacted by this project, because everything we're doing on this project is actually on the footprint of the building, the existing field house, and in fact, we're moving it a little further away from your property line.
So am I correct in saying they're not going to clear that piece of land there, and they're not going to put parking there? Because now you're going to have less parking
Yeah.
for your coaches and everything.
I want to be real clear with the question. We are not touching, clearing, or doing anything with the nub behind your house.
Thank you.
We are, the stone parking lot next to the field? We are going to try to accommodate 3 or 4 parking spaces there, so that if someone has a wheelchair, they can park there and get into the building and access it. But I want to be clear, the nub, as we are now affectionately calling it, we are not clearing trees, we are not going up on the hill behind you, that is remaining untouched.
So with that, just one more thing.
Yeah.
Did they look at the traffic pattern? Because I don't know how somebody hasn't gotten killed over there with the field house and the busing. Where will they be dropping these children off to go from one place to the other? Because you're coming up on a very busy road.
Yep.
They block driveways, especially mine. And the kids come out and they walk and nobody pays attention. We have gone out and put flashers on. We've done all that. Has a study been done for the traffic?
There has been no traffic study done.
Sharon, can I just?
I just wanted to add one more comment. Right now, we use the auxiliary gym for all that testing, which means the students are displaced from their gym activities, so we'd like to have another space to be able to do that. That's, your question was, do we do those testing now? We do all that testing now, and it takes up the auxiliary gym. Anytime do we do that testing?
So we don't use the classrooms anymore for the SAT and the...
We do use those classrooms for certain activities, but a lot of the time we wind up taking the auxiliary gym, especially for larger testing.
Hi, Madeline Brown, 13 Burkendine Road. I just have a couple questions.
Sure.
So you mentioned, you called them 2 team rooms. That's a locker room?
Correct.
Okay, so to meet Title IX, there's 2 locker rooms, a home and away for girls, a home and away for boys.
Just to clarify, there's no home and away. There are 2 for the Caldwell-West Caldwell female athletes. One might be given to field hockey, one might be given to lacrosse, one might be given to cross country. These aren't being built for away teams.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, for example, when a visiting football team comes, they're typically the few sports that are given an opportunity to use a space at halftime to reconvene. Everybody else, like soccer, field hockey, they all convene in the corner of the field. My understanding is, and I know you live stream this, so if any football teams that are watching, I'm told you make them walk all the way back to the high school here just to tire them out. So even they're not going to be allowed to use the new field house. That will only be for Caldwell-West Caldwell athletes. So I just want to clarify, when you say home and away, these are for athletes in this high school only, and we're giving 2 each. One is larger, one is smaller, with the expectation that now you can house 2 female sports in the field house between the 2 locker rooms.
Okay, because what I was going to ask is, I'm not sure.
Do you want me to go back to the plan?
Well, no, my question was actually a little bit how that compares to what happens in the gym, as in the indoor, as far as the 2 locker rooms and how they're used, and how those locker rooms would be used in comparison to how they're used here. 'Cause
So
I from last time, I thought that you were speaking of a home and an away team.
No.
Specifically because of the football players that have to walk
the
down.
ones out there are going to be for, the team rooms in particular, are going to be for the athletes. Football, baseball, lacrosse, women's lacrosse, I'm sorry? Track. I was getting there. You know, whatever the sports are, right? That's not up to me. That'll be up to the group here. We've designed them for use. My understanding is now that only football can use it because of the limiting
Yes.
space, and then in the spring, I guess maybe a baseball or lacrosse team uses it. There's no accommodation for the females. So what happens now, I would guess, and we didn't talk about this specifically, but based on my experience, the physical education lockers are used during the day, where kids are changing into sneakers potentially to go do what physical education activities they do. And then the athletes, after school, will go in and often use the same area to change for practice. Most of those, as many as can be accommodated, will be relocated to the field house now, so that the after hours can be used for freshmen, for example.
And the plan is strictly home team. Okay. My next question then is, has there been a second set of plans created without, let's say, maybe the second floor? Has there been any thought to a third question on the referendum? Question 1, question 2, $15 million. Question 3, we see the ADA, we see the Title IX, we see the locker rooms. Maybe we don't need the second floor, and give us the opportunity to vote on that. Because if this does not pass, now a year later, maybe we're back to the drawing board, and we're that much further behind in offering what might be a great building up there with 4 locker rooms, ADA, Title IX. So is there a compromise to be had, a third question to be offered?
So a third question is a difficult thing to accommodate, and I'll share why. To answer your first part of the question, we've gone through 7 evolutions of a design of the field house, including 1-story options. And what we tried to do was we tried to talk to the athletic director, the high school principal, and we tried to identify what do we need, what do we want, and where are we? And it was decided after going through that evolution that the board decided, okay, based on all the arguments that have been made, we shrunk, we pulled, we pushed, we are going to present a 2-story option to the community. And the timing is such that we had to hit the March deadline, because otherwise the debt rolls off and the window for question 1 goes away, right? So we were already under the gun because we actually came in as a new professional to replace someone, so we didn't have as much time to plan as we would have liked, but we did accomplish a lot. To be able to present a question 2 and then a question 3 that had the same project with a different scope, the challenge is, what if they both pass? Now I got a 2-story and a 1-story that have approved. Which one do we go with? So I think the board had to make a decision as your representatives, because they were voted in to the board, to present what they believe is the best solution. If question 1 passes and Fieldhouse question 2 fails, there is no harm, no foul. We will lose a little time. We'll do a debrief with the community, and if the community says, look, we would have supported a 1-story, great, then we can go back out to another referendum with a reduced scope, and we will not have lost the tax-free option that has to be presented in March. And to save some money, because elections cost money, they figured, well, let's present what we believe is the best option. I don't want to put words in the board's mouth, but that's the conclusion that I came to. We vetted 7, maybe even 8 options, and some of them were 1-story. But again, it was decided that, listen, this is a process. The community's going to get a chance to vote, and arguably they heard as much support, perhaps, as they did concern for the 2nd story based on the dollar amounts, which is why they had agreed to subsidize some of that through capital reserve to make the $140 on the average assessed home annually come down to maybe $129.
And in your discussions at all the back-to-school nights, are you finding the community is very pro 2 stories versus
Honestly, it's been
one?
mixed. It's literally been, we don't get if you can appreciate, back-to-school nights are about the kids, so I'm pretty much ignored. But we did have, I would say, between 10 and 20 people who came up to us. Some didn't understand any of this. Once explained, they're like, oh, we get it. I got the questions like, my kid doesn't play sports. I'm not going to vote for the field house. Okay, but just recognize this is more than just, your kid takes physical education, right? Your kid goes to a football game. Your kid may do testing. So I would offer to you that there was 50% plus or minus supportive of it, 50% plus or minus not supportive of one or the other. Question 1, no one really even talked much about it. They didn't either know it existed or they said to me, oh, I got it. I didn't know this was first thing. So right now, from the exposure that I've had, it seems pretty balanced, but obviously that's based on a very small feedback.
Well, and also to point out probably the obvious, that's of people who already have students in school. That's not everybody else in the community. That I have parents in the community had no idea this was happening.
Yep.
You know, so once the word gets out to them and how do they vote for this, you know, there's a certain set of community members that want nothing to raise their taxes. So, you know,
listen.
if there was a way to you know, address this with them, they're not coming to Board of Ed meetings, they're not coming to back to school nights.
And
so
we're
we
gonna
are
be working-
sampling a small percentage of the school community, an even smaller percentage of the Caldwell-West Caldwell community as a whole has even any clue that this is happening.
And that's a great point. And we had a deadline to meet in September. So the Department of Education applications were our priority because if we missed that deadline, they won't review it for eligible costs and we can't get to March. Now that that deadline is behind us, we're going to work with the district on basically a communications campaign. We're going to update a website with all this information on it. We're going to send out frequently asked questions using social media, using pamphlets, because you're right. You know, at the end of the day, there are people who are not actively involved in the schools. We need to communicate with them. There are people in the schools who don't pay attention to what's happening. So we run the gamut, we understand that, but there will be a dedicated effort to get the word out with factual information and then let the people decide.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Hi, Linda Gurman, 43 Memorial Road, West Caldwell. Just very quickly, more as just an FYI, before I came down here, I apologize, I was a few minutes late. I did walk over to the field house because I've never been in there, and I did want to see it, and there was a young men's soccer game going on of some kind, and lots of the young men were doing what they were supposed to do, getting changed and whatnot, and I did not see any sort of district representative over there and was not comfortable approaching the men's locker room by myself. So I am still very interested in touring the field house, but there wasn't anybody over there. So if we could, you know, I don't want to hold anybody hostage beyond this meeting or whatever, but if there's another opportunity to tour it again or something, and just, you know, note there was not anybody over there, that would be helpful. I did take a quick look at the ladies' room because that was open and no one else was over there, but yes, that's pretty much it. And I just want to mention too that I'm still learning about this project myself, but I am an avid supporter of more public bathrooms in general in this town based on my experience with sporting events with the younger set, which poor former board member, Mr. Elko, who is here, is familiar with. Sorry, Chris. But yes, I know the district added some porta-johns and other things at some of the elementary schools for the younger kids to have activities because people who go to these events don't have anywhere to, unfortunately, use facilities. So it's important, if you're going to be at a field for many hours with your kid or your family supporting them, to have something on site. So that's it. I'm done. I will gladly pass this to somebody else. Sorry.
So there's definitely someone up there. They might have been on the second floor, which no one's supposed to be up there, but we say go up there anyway. We'll be open on the 21st and the 4th from 6 to 8 again. So if you really want to get up there, there was someone up there. They probably might have been sitting on the second floor, but they should have been in front. But it'll be open on the 21st and November 4th again from 6 to 8. Okay?
Liz Hart, 149 Ravine. I have a question. I know you mentioned that there was about 7 to 8 iterations of the plans. Are you able to share a rough approximate differential between, or variance between just the floor 1 and then the floor 1 plus 2? Like, was it double? Is it a quarter, 25%
Yeah, so
more?
so I'll work backwards, right?
Yeah.
So the $15 million number assigned to it, there are a few components to a budget. There are what we call hard costs.
Right.
Hard costs are the actual construction value that we will see in a bid. Then we have contingencies. The Department of Education requires us to carry at least 5%. We carry 10% because on any construction project, there's always unforeseen conditions. If we don't use the contingencies, great, the board gets that money back, the taxpayers get that money back. We have market escalation, which is part of the contingency, which is basically, we know that the cost of things continue to increase, and then you have soft costs. Soft costs are the professionals, the attorney that has to bond the work, the architects, the engineers, the permitting, DE, anybody that is involved on the soft side. So when we talk about hard costs, and I'll work my way backwards, the cost of construction for the 2 stories, if you were to drop it to 1 story, you don't cut the project in half from a cost perspective. Why? Because imagine you remove the 2nd floor, you still have a roof to construct, it just drops 1 floor. So you are eliminating conditioned square footage, you're eliminating flooring, ceilings, lights, doors. So there is no question a reduction in the construction cost that's associated with it, and proportionally the other things, permitting costs and professionals and the like. So if I had to guess, which I would be doing because I don't have that paperwork in front of me, I would say that we ranged from probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, $8 or $9 million on the low end to the 15 that we ultimately got to. Because you have to remember that because the footprint of the building is going from 3,000 to plus or minus a little under 8,000, the site work and the stormwater work remains unchanged whether we do a 1-story or 2-story building, right? We still have the same amount of displacement of water that we talked about earlier that has to be addressed. By putting a 2nd floor on that building, there's no additional water that's displaced because the footprint goes straight up. So the detention basin, the sidewalks, the relocation of the track of field events, all that is still part of the budget. That doesn't get reduced. So I trust that answers your question. It's not 50%, but order of magnitude, that's probably where we are.
So it's close to it, because you just said 8 million and then you said 15, so.
Yeah,
So it's
I
about-
can't remember the exact design, but it was 8 or 9 million on the low end,
Right.
which is not 50%, and 15, which is the number we have for the 2-story addition. So
Well, it's like double.
I'm sorry?
It's just slightly under double, based on what you're just estimating right now.
Based on my hypotheses, based on not having paperwork in front of me,
Right,
and
right.
trying to respond to your question, it's not 50%. Could it be 55 or 60? Hard to say. I'm just trying to give you a range that it's not just a simple cut in half.
Okay, all right. And then I just have a general question
Sure.
on how the loan works, right?
The loan? Yeah.
The loan, yes,
Yep.
sorry, apologies.
It's okay.
So if it's a 20-year loan, is that like at a variable rate? Will our taxes change every year, or is it like a fixed rate?
So
How
it's a
does that
great
work?
question. So I'm not the financier, but I know enough to be dangerous. So
Okay.
come on the journey with me. I want to give you an analogy if I can so that you can appreciate it. For all of us that have mortgages, we pay that monthly. That's not the way Board of Education works, and my finance guru will correct me if I misspeak. Board of Education's pay twice a year. But what will happen is post-referendum, they will go out to bid for bank rates, just like they do for construction. Financial institutions will bid in reverse, where the contractors are going to bid up, and we have to get the lowest one to do the work. The banks will bid from high to low. So similarly, you're looking for the best rate, and they're going to compete each other to get your business and get the lowest rate. The rate is typically locked in at a percentage. The district makes payments twice a year, correct, Brian?
Semi-annual, correct.
So it's not like a monthly mortgage, but it should be fixed, and I believe we're looking at a 20-year loan right now, but that has not been completely finalized because the financial people are working on that. What I can tell you is we are all accustomed to the crazy interest rates of 8% for mortgages. That's not the case with public borrowing. These rates are still under 4%. So conservatively, the financial consultant is holding 4% for the purposes of the numbers that I shared, but we've opened on other projects in the 3.5, 3.6, 3.7 rate. So the interest rates are still actually very attractive for this kind of work.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Alexis Martin, 42 Johnson Avenue. Some of my questions were answered by previous people, but I have two questions. Who manages the fields and the field house, and how will that happen with the new, I don't know if this is a question for you.
Absolutely
but
not.
like how does that work? Because my experience as a parent is that my child has practiced in a field that then they were told 10 minutes later it was fertilized and that they weren't supposed to be on the field. So there is inequity amongst the sporting people in the school. So my big question is, who manages that? Who makes sure that it's equitable to not just boys and girls, but highly competitive sports teams and less competitive sports teams? Because that, I as a parent, I find that to be problematic. So that's my first question. And my second question, can someone from the board talk a little bit about the decision making that went into the second story? Because we're all looking at it as $15 million, that's a ton of money. But if you say to us, here, A, B, and C, these are the reasons why we think that the two-story at the higher price tag is beneficial to everybody, to just so we have a little insight into what your thought process was.
I'll sit down.
Dr. Compton, the site supervisor, you want to talk about that first?
So So we have the custodial staff at the high school that does that, along with our custodial staff that does all the buildings and takes care of all of our outside facilities. If there's a specific question about a specific team, I couldn't answer that question. That'd be something the athletic director would have to answer. Who did the fertilizing? I couldn't really speak to that as well because I don't know the specifics of it. But if you could send me an email tomorrow, I definitely could look into it and speak with the athletic director, but I can't really answer specific questions about that. So just send me an email tomorrow.
Sure.
And
It's more about, my question is more about moving forward. How do we make sure that the custodians are giving equitable time to everybody in the school and not just the larger grossing athletes?
you mean like in terms of field adjustment, like taking care of the fields?
I'm talking about you have two girls' locker rooms and two boy locker rooms. How do we decide out of the 5 or 6 girl teams and boy teams that are practicing for season, how does that get divvied up? How my child is on a sport that, again, this is just a case in point, had a bad experience practicing on a field, but how do we make sure that they get as much time as a football team?
Oh, you mean in the field house?
In all the brand new things that are happening, yes.
So in the field house, it's equitable or equal. Actually, 50% of the locker space is set up for the boys, and 50. So who's going to determine who gets to use what locker rooms when? That's going to be the athletic director, and the building principal is going to kind of decide who gets to use that space. Not something I would decide. It's something that the athletic director would decide, the coaches would discuss, and that's how that's going to get decided when it eventually gets built in 3
my
years?
experience,
Is that what
as
you're
Dr.
asking?
Conklin just said, the athletic director is responsible for managing the coaches. So it'll be the athletic director that assigns practice field slots. He coordinates with teams coming in for games, and he has to coordinate that. And I suspect, to Dr. Conklin's point, the field house and its usage will also be governed primarily through board policy and the athletic director's discussion with the coaches and the needs with the principal.
Thanks.
So hold on. Let's finish the question that was asked, which is how did we get to decision making
Thank you.
for A, B, and C? Which is that was your turn.
So in light of that answer, does the board have a protocol in place for how the athletic director is meant to divvy up the spaces? And if not, is that something that can happen?
We'll have to look at that because I'm not sure, but yes, it's something that definitely can happen.
there is a specific procedure that they do make that determination at the beginning of the year. Fields, because we have a limited number of fields, that the athletic director does make that schedule and makes that determination. The same thing with the field house now. It's available for the football team because there's only room space for that. So.
There was a second question.
The process.
Alexis, so we had weekly meetings with Greg. Oh, I'm sorry. We had weekly meetings with Greg and a committee. The coaches were there. The athletic director was there. The high school principal was there. And really kind of Greg touched on it before. We were tasked with this is what, we need as an athletic community. Also, Jim Devlin was there. He had mentioned, that the space in the high school, the auxiliary gym, that was primarily occupied by the wrestling mats and the wrestling practice. And if we were able to open up that space back there, that could be used. I mean, if you're in education, you know that space is always an issue. And so anytime we can make more space in schools, that's a great thing. So that was kind of the intention behind moving, the wrestling space onto that second floor to create some more space in the high school. But again, also making sure that as the board, we were listening to, the coaches and athletic directors, again, making it Title IX compliant, ADA compliant, and we came up with this design. And as Greg said, now it's up to you all to the people to vote. Okay, sure.
Hi, Shay Brooks, 341 Passaic Avenue. I guess I'll start with the easy one first, which is regarding.
We should start with the hard ones.
No, it's better I start with this one. With the field house. Have you received feedback from current athletes, students, to get their feedback on the plans, right? Obviously, they would have the most valuable input because they use the current field house and could have great ideas on the proposal. And then the second question is, what percentage of high school students here are athletes, and does the new size justify the demand of the athlete population?
So, question one is, we did not meet with any athletes. Post-referendum, we will. But we had a bit of a time constraint based on the fact that we were brought in later than we would normally like to be. But the program, which is what we do to design, whenever we start a process for problem solving, we start off with a program. We identify, all right, what are the needs, what are the wants? And again, it's pretty straightforward in this case that the existing building is antiquated. It has several issues that have been identified many times, and the goal was to get places for the female athletes, to get public restrooms. Obviously, we could have gone bigger. We could have done 3 each, 4 each. We could have accommodated every fall and spring sport. It's difficult to do, but one would argue that by relocating some athletes to the field house, it will free up space that is now being shared in the existing locker room. So there is that balance as well. So the answer to your question is we did not. However, typically we do, and in this case we would meet with them post-referendum because the drawings are just schematic. They are only created to a level that the Department of Ed can review it and sign off. The Department of Ed doesn't want the district to spend money unnecessarily and to develop a set of drawings to such a detail that if the referendum is unsuccessful, you would have wasted it. So there's a minimum requirement to get it to the DOE so they can review it in a reasonable way, but that stops. All of the discussions about details, locker sizes. Look, football has a different locker requirement than a lacrosse. Softball, baseball have different requirements based on bats and balls and helmets and things like that. So we will absolutely be meeting with the athletes post-referendum to get their input on the finishing touches. Obviously, if they say to us, this has happened, we would love a ball pit. We'd love a jacuzzi for those after-hours games. Yeah, that's great. Go talk to your parents because that's not happening here. But they do offer great insight. We love that input. Post-referendum, that will be discussed. As to your second question, I could not tell you how many athletes or what percentage of the high school students play. I'm sure the board could get that information for you and give it back to you. But I think the challenge is, from my takeaway in meeting with the athletic director, the principal, and the coaches, is that what you have out there is insufficient on so many levels that you're not creating more to accommodate some growing athletic population. You're focusing on modernizing, making healthier, making it equitable.
We had the same question actually as a board, and that's a great question. And I don't know if we have the exact number, but I know when I heard it, it was a lot higher than I thought. Dr. Conklin, do you remember what that number was? What?
A little over 70% of our students.
70%.
Some athletic.
That's a lot.
And another 15% for clubs and things like that. So we have about 85% of our students participating in some extracurricular activity at the high school.
Yeah.
So the size justifies demand.
Yeah, I mean, we were surprised at how high it, I mean, surprised and not surprised, but we had the same question. It
Okay.
makes sense, right?
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Can I just piggyback off that?
We need to have a
Hold on, wait.
microphone.
Yeah.
Just so people are live streaming. That's, no, you're good.
Okay. No, you want to ask your follow-up? Okay. No problem. I do, but on question one. Okay, all right, sorry. My first time here. So then the second one, which is, or the more difficult, is regarding question number 1. And you and I spoke briefly at Wilson's Back to School. So first off, I think all the improvements, with the exception of the security vestibules, are great and totally have my support. In regards to the security vestibules, at least speaking on Wilson School, I presume that the cost of building those is millions, right? Maybe, no? Hundreds of thousands?
Yeah, I mean, so
Okay.
it depends. So by way of example, finish your question.
Okay, so my personal opinion is the security vestibules, at least based on what we discussed and where they would be, have no value as far as increasing security at these schools, right? Specifically with Wilson, you put the vestibule in front of the main door, but you're not protecting the gym door that's right next to it. And then there's 6 other exterior doors where anybody could go in. So I just don't think we should be hemorrhaging that kind of money for nothing, right? Whereas we could put automatic lockdown security systems, right? Instead of these Velcro window things, maybe we could put in an automated thing, or fencing, locking. My son, his first day of kindergarten at Wilson, there was a breach in security and my son was left unattended in the playground where there's open access to the neighborhood, and he could have walked on Passaic Avenue and gotten hit, you know? So putting up fencing, anything else, it just seems like paying all of that money for a vestibule that doesn't move the needle in a positive direction just doesn't seem worth it. So can you guys as a board, and as you as the architect, look at alternative options? Have you brought in a security expert, right, to assess these schools and provide recommendations? Yeah, anything like that.
So, complicated question, but I'll try to do my best to answer it.
Okay.
Part of this project is not in the millions, right? It's hundreds of thousands, but it will depend, because in the case of the high school, we're doing interior sets of doors because we have a nice big vestibule. Right. In some of the other schools, we have to do a small addition, so proportionally that's going to be a little bit more expensive. The state supports most of the security vestibule projects that we're doing and will subsidize it by 34%. And part of the goal was to bring equity to the schools, because some schools have vestibules, and by way of example, the high school does not. Because the schools were designed decades ago, the philosophies have changed. Main offices used to be in the middle of the school, so people could be omnipresent. The administration could see what's happening in all the hallways, and then as things evolved and security became a bigger issue, main offices were being relocated to the front where control was being given to ingress and egress. Your observations are accurate, and some of the things you just mentioned have nothing to do with me as an architect and have everything to do with administrations, the teachers, and the people who are here day to day, because no vestibule is going to prevent every tragedy. It's a deterrent, right? And you say it's moving the needle, at the end of the day, it does move the needle. It may be a little, it may be a lot, and I'm not suggesting that the other recommendations you're making wouldn't move the needle, but if we do an automated set of closures over these doors, what are we doing with all the windows that are around the perimeter? Well, and that's in the millions, and then your schools start to look like jails. And so the opposition to your position is, where do we strike a balance? So I'm not suggesting that the security vestibules are the end all. This is to bring equity where some schools have them and some schools don't. It's intended as a deterrent so that people go to the front door. But if someone goes out to the playground with students and leaves the door propped open, then there's no question that no matter what we do, I mean, we have systems where doors are automatically locked. You can set the locking mechanism that when that door closes behind you, it is locked. And for those of you that have tried to come to a board meeting once where no one was ready to let you in yet, you know it's not necessarily easy. And conversely, how many times have you walked up where an athlete or a student was leaving the building and held the door open for you because you raised such polite children that they left the door open for you, and literally they were letting someone in that they had no idea who it was. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that the vestibules are a very small piece of question number one. The heating pipes, the brickwork, the air conditioning that's being proposed, yes, those are big ticket items, and the vestibules are certainly a dollar amount. I don't have that specific, but I can certainly get that to you. But it's not in the millions, and in my opinion, it is moving the needle a little bit, partially for equity, and partially because, believe it or not, it is a deterrent. But your other observations are reasonable, and that's something that can't necessarily be fixed through architectural or capital improvement.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that any of the schools should look like Rikers Island.
I agree.
I agree with you. I just don't necessarily feel like putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into a vestibule when someone can just open the gym door right next to it. I don't need to go in this glass box to get into the main entrance because there's a gym door right here. So I think that it would be great if the board also considered smaller security improvements that could be within that budget that would actually maybe add better value to security. And then going back to the voting question, it's a similar voting question as far as breaking it down on the ballot for question one, right? Because my honest opinion is I'm all for all the improvements in question number one, except the security. So that may skew my vote to a no, right? If it's all lumped in together versus if you say for question number one, do you approve the piping? Yes. Do you improve the steam?
So unfortunately,
yes.
That's not the way this works because the applications that went down to the state were packaged by school. Each school needs its own application, and there are multiple projects in each application. The debt service aid, you know, you can appreciate that, again, these board members were elected as your representatives and are trying to do the best job that they can. Imagine the chaos if we asked for everyone to vote on an individual line item of a project. How do I manage the contingencies? How do I manage, you know, there's order of magnitude that we will benefit from pricing by having a contractor bid on multiple projects. So unfortunately, the way the system is designed, question one has no tax impact, and you will be voting on question one in its entirety as its package. We did it to get to tax neutral, tax zero. If we added some of the other amenities that you talked about or some of the other improvements, that might have taken us where it might have had a $10, $20, $30 tax impact. So there was a laundry list of projects, and we literally played Jenga to try to get these things to work out so that we got the things that are needed and some of the things that would be liked into question one, $0 to you. So I would urge you to support it and not let your one small bias.
That's a big thing in today's world, security. You know?
It is, but it's not going to change the fact that if you vote no on question one, the pipes at the middle school will be replaced, and it'll either have to come out of capital reserve or your taxes will go up at some point because you're going to be back here screaming at me if your kid gets sent home when he gets to middle school because there's no heat in the building because 75-year-old pipes have disintegrated.
I'll be screaming at you the vestibule things.
You won't be the first, I'm sure. Anyway, you're very welcome.
I'm a little confused. I went to school here. I'm class of 1985, and I've been here a long time, 50 years in this town. There's 70% of our student body that plays a sport other than taking gym. Is that correct in what you said? I would really like to see those numbers. I believe it's higher than I think, but there is no way it is 70% of our. Thank you. I would appreciate that because long time here.
Dr. Kunkel, the gentleman in yellow right here.
Oh, sorry. Did you have one? Sure.
I just wanted to know about the locker rooms. That's still on that. So
Yeah, so the locker room / team rooms,
Yep.
there are 2 for the men, 2 for the women. The larger locker room, I'm going to go based on.
There's 2 large locker rooms, both equal size on both sides.
Dr. Conklin, you need to go on the microphone. It's okay.
So why 2? Why not one big? If they're not home and away,
Well, because
why
you have
2?
because you have. Let's talk about the female athletes. Track. Who said
Woohoo!
track? You have cross country in the fall. You have field hockey, lacrosse. So there are multiple sports. The goal is to accommodate 2 of the women's sports in separate locker rooms. You wouldn't want to put, hypothetically, softball and lacrosse. They both play in the spring, right? Yes. Yeah. You wouldn't want to put them into one locker room.
Why not?
So, well, because they're 2 different teams.
Well, if it saves us $1 million, then
Well, I'm not sure it's going to save you $1 million, but at the end of the day,
That's what I'm
we created a design that was based on a program that was provided by the athletic director and the coaches. The coaches provided input, they told us. So it is, we could have designed 1 locker room each. That could have been an option. That wasn't the direction we were given. So we created 1 large, 1 small to give the athletic director and the coaches more flexibility to accommodate more athletes out in the building.
so without, I understand you're saying you don't know the locker numbers, but without that information, I'm guessing you at least know the maximum occupancy. So
Yeah.
how many
So I do know the locker
athletes
counts.
will each
So
of those?
The locker, I think it's 80 and 50. So 80 on the big one for the men, 80 on the big one for the women, and then I think 50 on the small one. Because remember, here's the other issue. So let's use football as an example because that's probably a worst case scenario.
Yes, let's use
Well,
football.
because the football lockers have to be significantly bigger, shoulder pads and things like that. So in order to accommodate the worst case scenario, you have a large number of lockers. Lacrosse sticks. But in the case of track and field or cross country, you have sneakers, shorts, and the requirement is much smaller. So you can arguably get more lockers into a smaller square footage. Does that make sense?
Yes, so, but maybe football, I mean, does our biggest team have 80 and 50?
Yes.
We have, aside from football, we have 80 people on another team?
That I could not tell you, but the numbers that were given to me outlined the number of athletes, and they were varied from, 50 to 80, depending, because remember, sometimes you're dealing with varsity and JV. So these are not just intended necessarily for a varsity team.
Right. That just, and I don't know, and hopefully people who know more about this can respond to this. That seems like a lot of people. Like if you're saying we want 2, we want the teams separate. So here's 80, and here's, girls soccer, boys cross country, whatever. Look at all this empty space now. Because we don't need to
some of them
accommodate
will be able to
80
share.
and
So for
50.
example, because we were designing to equity, right? So you do have sometimes a lowest common denominator. So in the case of football, because of the bigger lockers, line of sight, when we matched the square footage on the girls' side, you could arguably get 2 fall sports into the larger locker room, dividing left and right, and a 3rd sport in the smaller locker room. The management and the use of it will be delegated to the athletic director and the coaches. Our job was to collect the information that was provided to us and to try to design something taking into account a worst case scenario, taking into account equity, and trying to give the most flexibility to the athletic director and the coaches to make the most use of that building.
So I also graduated here. I played sports here. I'm trying to get on board with this. It seems like the more we're hearing about it, it's difficult for me to fathom an 80-person locker room and a 50-person locker room twice. Like and I'm trying to get. When I went here, our football team was state champions every year. I am very much go Chiefs. I buy into that. But it really, when you're trying to convince a community that this is not just for the football team, everything we're hearing makes it sound like it's just for the football. I understand that you're saying it's not.
Let me be clear. Number one, I'm going to go double check my numbers to make sure it's not 60 rather than 80, because again, I don't have that paper. Well, actually, I might be able to get it for you before the night's out. Maybe it's 60 and I'm misspeaking rather than 80, but I'll get you the real number. I want to be clear. Football was a consideration in this design. Yep. I don't want everyone to think that somehow all of a sudden football was cast to the side and the goal was the facility, right? The facility out there has its limitations, and the goal was to improve them while bringing equity. So in the case of football, whether it's 60 or 80, and I'll get you that number, they're going to fit that number of football players in that one side. If the girls' teams with smaller equipment make use of the 60 or 80, whichever one it is, and you can get 2 groups into the one larger locker room because they each have 40 and 20 or 35 and 40, whatever the numbers are, you still have that other smaller team room that is also available for in this case, the girls' side, a 3rd team. I will get you the number of the lockers, because what was resonating with was 80. It might be 60, but I'll double check that for you. But again, as for the usage, football was very much a consideration. I mean,
thank you for at least saying it.
I would be run out of town if I didn't acknowledge that football, and again, football has a huge following. But the goal was, while we're willing to address, and now I'm going to speak for the board, and they can shut me up. While we're willing to address the needs of football that has a successful program and that has the support of the community, if we're going to do anything, it has to be more than just that, right? And so I think it was mentioned, part of the 2nd floor was to create a space to free up the auxiliary gym, because when the wrestlers use that in the winter, there's other things that cannot take place. By creating a space that is multi-purpose, if the wrestlers were to move to that 2nd floor, you pick up a whole other space for other things that are athletic in nature. The multi-purpose space was designed in such a way where there'll probably be a partition down the middle. So if you have 2 smaller groups and you have cheerleaders, I heard from one of the parents at one of the back-to-school nights, and they need to go because the weather's inclement and they just want to go and talk or do some stuff. I mean, that's an indoor space that can be used while the other ones are being used here. So there's no question football was part of the conversation, drove some of the decisions, partially because it is the lowest common denominator. They have the biggest pads, the biggest storage needs, and all that kind of stuff. But I will also tell you with 100% certainty that when we talked about this, there was a focus on every other athlete and other options to improve the school system.
Good evening, Glenn Moselle, 110 Knoll Terrace, West Caldwell. I think what we have here is your basic design, we call it IT, which I spent my whole life in, called mission creep. We all got together and said we need a new field house. Everyone said that's great. Then someone got the bright idea about adding the 2nd floor. We could have more meeting space and other things associated with it. We need a field house. A field house is not meant for wrestling. It's meant for sports that take place on that field or close to it. I have 2 kids that graduated from the school in 2013-16. They both had great sports careers here, so I'm on board with the Caldwell Chiefs. But as this plan stands right now, I can't support it. If I could support a 1-level building, which would just house what the teams need, but not a 2-level building. And as what you were saying about the way the questions could be posed, that's a simple IT program you could whip up in 3 hours. If they vote yes on the second question, it overrides this 3rd question to vote no, or vice versa. One is a separate issue.
Yeah.
So that's an easy program to put together.
Well, I can assure you that the state of New Jersey is not going to create a custom program for the typical ballot election pieces that are rolled out. And they had a hard enough time updating Mr. McCarthy's budget software from year to year. So these are not protocols that I create.
Oh, I understand.
These are protocols
I understand.
that the state of New Jersey governs, that the county officials govern, and certainly there's a workaround to a lot of different things, but the process and the way it evolves is that your elected officials make decisions, they present it, and then depending on the outcome, either modify or go back and get input. Because again, everyone's going to have a different opinion. Clearly, some don't support it, some need more information, some support it. So we are just the authors of the documents and are presenting what we were told should be presented to the community.
I urge the board to just go back to a one floor. Just exactly what the athletes need. Nothing fancy. It's a field house. It's only going to be used several months out of the year. Thank you.
Matthew Mictus, 39 Forest Avenue in Caldwell. Well, there's a lot. I'm going to try and keep it short. I think the second floor, the way it's thrown up, and it's with wrestling specifically, and I understand it can be used for everything else. So I guess my first question is, what is the auxiliary gym used for today that we need to move wrestling out of there to gain use of that facility?
Yeah, so I don't know that I could answer.
So that's more for the board.
I don't know, someone with the board, or you have to get that information from the athletic director. I don't know.
Do you know?
What's the auxiliary gym used for today that we need to move wrestling out into the field house?
So it's used for wrestling after school during the time. It's used for gym, lunch, a bunch of different other activities throughout the day. So it definitely takes up space, especially when the wrestling team is in there. The mats get in the way, so we'd be able to clear a lot of that space out and make it more accessible. If anyone here at lunchtime, it's really crowded here at lunchtime. We did some construction to try to make some more space. We'd like to be able to use that gym more often, and as soon as wrestling season starts, it kind of eats up some of that space. We also, the idea of having this additional space gives us an opportunity to do other things and offer also community space as well, and open up some more space here, especially with the auxiliary gym. So. Oh, you mean over there? I can't.
So you will have this space available. I hope you will have this space available for what?
For opening it up for lunch, not having to.
3 o'clock on. Wrestling doesn't happen at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday.
So we also partner with the rec program in the community, and they're always looking for that. So once wrestling kind of goes in there, that would be again available for rec to be able to use for after school, because we do partner with the rec, and they often use all of our gyms. So that would be an opportunity for them to do after school activities with the students and community that don't typically go to sports here in high school as well. So we take that in consideration when we're making these decisions.
I acknowledge then that the field house, which I've been in, is a dilapidated mess, and it can't be fixed, and it certainly can't be retrofit to meet current code and constraints. So, granted, right? Something needs to happen. To your point, something needs to happen. But doesn't putting wrestling in there and then everything else as a consequence afterwards, as an afterthought, then violate Title IX? It's no longer equitable, right? If the wrestling mats are a pain in the butt to move, and you got to roll them up and get them out of the way, so they're going to be down, was any credence given to raising the roof and doing volleyball or doing softball and track, right? So why not go up and really make it accessible, maybe basketball, right? So other things you can do over there, you'll gain more space. You're already putting a second floor. Was credence given to do that?
So
right?
So the answer is we discussed that actively. Part of the 7 or 8 options included a bigger footprint and a higher ceiling to accommodate basketball, volleyball, other events. It was ultimately decided that that was a compromise to back down from. The athletic director and the principal didn't feel that kind of space was needed, and so we were able to lower the roof, shrink the footprint to reduce the cost. Because if you accommodate a basketball court, even without bleachers, the footprint of the second floor is not big enough to accommodate a regulation-sized basketball court and the clearances around it. Putting aside any bleachers, if you just want to make it a practice space, the footprint you have there, we happen to show 2 wrestling mats. Again, it's the lowest common denominator. We have to fit to accommodate wrestling the 2 mats. Any other multi-purpose type usage could be fit within that group. So that was our lowest common denominator. When we had the basketball court as the lowest common denominator, the footprint was bigger, the ceiling was higher, it was explored, and the guidance was, okay, that's an opportunity to save a few dollars. That was not felt to have been needed. And maybe it's because, well, if we move wrestlers out of the auxiliary gym, now you have a basketball court that you get there, right? To answer your question earlier. So there are moving things that are happening that the athletic director was chiming in on, but to your point, that was explored and discounted.
Yeah. So I think I'm on the same page at this point, is that field house should be a field house should be a field house. Take the money left over, whatever we're going to do. You spend, you got 15, get it down to 8. 8 sounds like an okay number, right? And if you've got the extra 7 lying around, fix the crumbling infrastructure, fix the schools, work on some curriculum, maybe, I don't know, augment the special services, right? Do some things for the district that are going to help every single kid who doesn't play a sport or who does. And then, yeah, fix the bathrooms so we don't have to wait online and it's not trash. So it's kind of where I'm at. You want to go next? Or are you done? Oh.
Alyssa Manelli, 39 Forest. You don't have to walk away. Again, to your point, sir, it's a field house. My children have gone through this school system. I have a 4th grader and a 6th grader. We are deficient in curriculum. We are doing things that are not working as far as spelling and inclusivity. We are running programs where our kids are behind. And we're looking at spending $15 million when our elementary school doors don't lock. I teach in Cedar Grove. They have a beautiful field house that houses bathrooms, and the children go back to the high school. I don't understand where this went from a bathroom problem to a $15 million building that looks like another elementary school, which, by the way, we could use because our schools are overflowing. So I am really trying to understand why we would allocate all this money to a clubhouse when we have so many more important things to do from a safety perspective. Our children's elementary doors don't lock. They're not safe if the doors don't lock. So
I can only address part of that, which is the educational things to which you refer are funded through the annual operating budget.
Okay.
So these are capital projects where you can't take the $7 million and put it towards more teachers because it's a one-time borrow, right? You need those kinds of things are a separate discussion that you should have with the Board of Education because those require an annual operating budget to accommodate another teacher for more instruction or to improve spelling or whatever the issues are. These projects are capital projects. This is the process to fund capital projects similar to an addition on your home where, we might fix a broken heater, we might fix a toilet, run to Home Depot, spend $300 and put it in. You can do that based on, our monthly budget. But if you do an addition, you typically get a second mortgage, you borrow, you whatever it is you do, and you pay it off a longer period of time because it will last longer. So there's a little bit of mixing an apple and oranges here. I'm not suggesting that your concerns are not valid, but some of those need to be in a separate conversation from the capital projects because these monies are not interchangeable. These monies aren't here year after year after year. They're borrowed, they're paid back, and they're for a capital project. You can get in your annual budget, they can increase the budget and say to the voters, we want to improve spelling, here's how we're going to do it. We want to include instructional space, here's how we're going to do it, and ask you to vote in the normal process, and then when they have that money, they can afford to pay that teacher year after year after year. So there's just to be clear.
I do understand that, but is that not instructional space that you're putting upstairs?
No.
You said it would be used as PD, that's instructional space,
No.
correct?
Well.
Testing, instructional space.
So.
I'm just confused, right?
I will do my best to clarify. Okay. To me, instructional space is a classroom that by the facility efficiency standards of the state of New Jersey Department of Education are used for classroom instruction during the course of the day, 7 or 8 periods. While professional development and testing may be educational in nature, a person taking a test is not being instructed. They sit, they take the test, they have to be proctored. In a classroom, there is instruction going on, and there is a difference. So this is not really considered instructional space. It's considered a multi-purpose space because they wanted to make it as appealing as possible, recognizing that there's going to be some pushback. And so we explored some of the options that were just mentioned here. They were discounted because they didn't feel like they needed that flexibility. So the goal is to try to make it as usable as possible. And I think there were some examples given on how that can happen. But from my perspective and the Department of Education's, I don't believe they would consider that instructional space.
Okay, then you should probably take professional development off because that is instructional.
That's fair, but it's not for the student, that's for the teacher.
Well, ultimately it is for the student, right? 'Cause
It's for the
you're
benefit of, I
educating.
get it. But I don't make the definitions of the rules, but I can appreciate the
Is there
feedback.
an amount that we are getting back, so to speak, because of this funding and it's equitable? Because I've heard you mention gender multiple times. So because this is, what was the code number? Is it
Title IX.
Title IX. Is this partly funded by the state?
No.
Okay.
We don't expect any state aid
Okay.
for the field house. If we get some, it'll be fantastic. If we get some, we might see it on the barrier-free compliance, but we are not expecting any for the field house. For everything else that I listed in question 1, our expectation is that you're going to get 34 cents on the dollar for every dollar in that question.
And there was no capped amount or no dollar amount that you were given to work within?
On the question 1, yes.
Not question 1, question 2.
No, question
field
2
house.
evolved. We went through 7 or 8 designs.
Okay.
And ultimately, we started with the program because no one really knows what things cost until you put it down on paper. So, okay, here's what we want, what we need, what we'd like. And then it evolved where we said, okay, well, if you're considering a second floor, we would recommend you consider making it large enough where if you need it for a basketball, you're going to need a higher ceiling. You're going to need a bigger footprint. We looked at that design. The feedback was, no, that's an opportunity for us to save some money. So there was no dollar amount given. It was program driven. And then the dollar amounts were actively discussed. And as I mentioned earlier, when the board said, okay, look, we want to present the $15 million one because we believe it has everything that we believe is warranted, but we're going to use $2 million out of capital reserve to ease the burden on the taxpayer.
Okay,
So they're subsidizing it.
The $2 million out of capital reserve, is that only for building improvements? That's set aside for only for building improvements?
Yes, capital reserve is only for capital improvements to the buildings.
Okay. But would security be considered capital improvements?
Yes.
So all the doors that don't lock, you couldn't use that $2 million to fix the doors? Because I know the security company that came in here.
Can you
Yeah.
clarify what, I mean, that's concerning. to me.
Yes,
You're
so,
telling me that
okay,
doors aren't locking.
Lincoln Elementary School.
Okay.
The teachers don't teach with the doors closed because it's too hot. And if they do lock, I've never seen them closed and locked. I know that there was a security company that came in here a few years ago and did a report. And they made recommendations, and I know this because I spoke with those same individuals when they did our check in Cedar Grove, which is where I teach. And the gentlemen were wonderful, and they said to me, the safest thing for our children are doors. There's never been a child shot in a door that is locked and closed. And every door shuts in Cedar Grove and locks. We are under a key card. I would like to know why we are not investing in that type of security for the betterment as opposed to, because if you're telling me it's coming from the same pot, it's capital improvements, why we would want to put $15 million into a clubhouse as opposed to $15 million into the safety and security of our children. And I'm going to relinquish the mic because I'm so frustrated at this point, and I do thank you all for putting up with me. I see it through a different lens, and I'm in that building with children every day. To know that my kids' doors don't lock and they're not safe and we're putting a $15 million ticket on a vote is upsetting.
All the doors lock. All the doors lock, inside and outside doors, just to be clear, all the doors lock inside and outside. Whether the teacher chooses to leave the door open is not a question that I can answer here, but I can tell you every single door in all of our schools has a lock and locks. So, and if they don't lock, we get it immediately fixed to make sure they do lock. If a teacher chooses to leave the door open, I can't speak to that. I'll speak to the principal about that, but I can tell you all the doors lock. And all the outside doors have key cards, and all those key cards are managed in a central location. So.
Dr. Conklin, can you also, though, speak to the first part about the curriculum-related questions about the presentations happening?
So on the 21st, you'll see a presentation about student performance, and hopefully the community will be happy. We did hit our specific marker last year, so 73% of our kids in 1st to 6th grade are reading on or above grade level, so that's exciting news. And then, as well as that, our high school went from 136 to 86, and we are now number 7 in high schools in Essex County because of our improvement in our performance on the math and the language arts tests. So we are making progress, and you'll see that progress next week on the 21st. Did anyone?
Hi, I'm Nina Luskin. I live at 38 Martin Road. That was amazing, but my question is a little simpler. Is the tax implication the same for West Caldwell and Caldwell residents, or will it be different, like perhaps the pool membership?
Yeah, so the answer to your question is because each community has a different tax base, they are a little bit different. The numbers that I shared were in the middle. So based on the financial advisor's number, where my number is 129, and I can't remember which community is which, one is going to be 128 on the average home, 128, and the other one was 130. So it's not a huge disparity, but just for simplicity, I used the number that was in the middle at 129, but you are 100% right, because the calculations are different for each community based on the tax base. They are not going to be the exact same number on the average assessed home. There is a little bit of a change. I happen to choose the middle just to make it simple to present.
Thank you.
You had a question?
Rich Genetempo, 24 Mountain Avenue, Caldwell. Well, on question 1, I mean, I can get behind most of the concept there because it's for all the kids. Everyone benefits for the most part. The one thing you say there that I don't agree with is, I understand the debt rolls off. You could return it to the taxpayers.
You could.
Right? I mean, we have $2 million in excess here. We could reduce taxes, right? I mean, it never seems to happen that way.
Look,
so
that is a conversation for a different group, not for the architect.
Yeah, I understand.
Right?
But they're here, right?
But I want to point out that while that statement is 100% true, the realities are that the dollar amount that is returned to you is proportionally smaller than if you pool the money to do needed projects. I think, someone has to pay for a new heating pipe in the schools. If not through the debt service aid that we're getting from the state, right? 34%. So yes, you're 100% right. It could have been returned.
I'm totally on board. Again, I could totally vote for 1. But we keep doing this. We keep saying it's only $86 per assessed value. It's only $140 per assessed value. We keep doing it over and over and over again. So I live in Caldwell, and the last administration was pretty much a train wreck, right? I mean, the issues they left the town. So our taxes the past 3 years have escalated a fair amount, and you keep asking for more. It gets kind of frustrating.
Sure.
And for this, I'm okay with 1. For 16,000 square feet, I'm gonna throw this at you, and it's not completely apples to apples, but it's pretty close. It includes prevailing wage, which I totally understand, by the way. Caldwell needs a new town hall. Instead of building a building, which would cost massive amounts, they bought a building on the corner of Ryerson and Bloomfield for about 2.7. They're going to renovate 11,000 square feet, getting bids. Total cost is going to be about $5 million for 11,000 square feet. Now, we're talking bathrooms, we're talking offices. How does this get to $16 million for this?
11,000 square feet?
When you say the first floor is 8,000, yeah. When you say the first floor is 8,000 square feet, that is a massive amount of space for locker rooms and bathrooms. It is.
So just to put things in perspective, your $5 million budget for the town hall, renovating at 11,000 square feet, is $454 per square foot.
Okay.
Our budget for new construction, which they don't have to deal with, foundation, drainage, everything else, we're budgeting about $600 a square foot, only $150 more a square foot. It is very much in line with new construction in the state of New Jersey for public work, so proportionally, they may not be getting such a great deal.
Wait, 16,000 square feet?
You have to remember, hard cost is what I'm talking about.
Oh, don't start with hard costs. I mean, you can't say that. I mean, that's
that's what I'm
the cost
talking
of the cost. I mean, you're taking.
When you talk about square footage,
right,
you're talking
Well,
about the hard cost.
But that's all included. Their hard costs are all included in that as well.
No, I'm not being clear. Let me try again.
That's
when we calculate cost per square foot, we calculate it on hard costs. On top of that, there are contingencies and soft costs.
Right.
So you threw a number at me that I thought was the bid from the contractor. I thought that's what I heard you say.
I believe that is a total cost.
Oh, well then we have to understand what the net number is,
Right.
and we can look
But
at square
still,
footage.
I look at
But
16,000.
interior renovations are much less expensive than new construction.
No, I
Sure.
understand foundations. I totally get it. But it's still a big number when you keep asking for more for people in the town.
I understand.
I mean, so, and by the way, to the number of students, I think what the coaches do, football, they report 70 or 80 kids. Basketball is the same kid could be playing 3 sports. So,
Right.
so you really could have
100%.
much less percentage. I mean, it's like a shell game they're playing. It's like, I mean, the coaches want this. So they're playing a shell game. We have so many kids that are involved. It's really not true. But I'm having a meet and greet for Buckner and Hulkley at my house October 25th. I would invite the whole board to be there, because I think it's better having a conversation back and forth with people. So 7 o'clock, Friday night, the 25th. Anybody else? More than welcome. 24 Mountain Avenue. But that's all. I mean, I could be on board with what you're saying about the one floor. And again, 8,000 square feet is a lot of square footage, people. I mean, it just seems massive.
Look,
It
I'm not
really
going to
does.
downplay it's a large field house.
I know.
But again, for what you're getting in the building, the square footage is reasonable for the spaces that are there. You couldn't design the spaces much smaller and have them as effective. You could, and you could say to the athletes, we can only accommodate 40 in each locker room. All these things are
That's
viable.
the thing we could talk about, like with how many sports, that's the girls' sports, how many sports per season? So in the fall, we have field hockey and we have soccer.
Cross country.
Volleyball?
Cross
But
country.
volleyball wouldn't be over there. I mean, if you're playing here,
Right.
why would you go over there
Well,
to
but
dress,
the
right?
point is that some of those will be freed up to go there to make more room for
No,
here.
but so let's say you had volleyball,
Yeah.
so you'd have 3.
Yeah.
So you'd have 3, including field, and so you're talking 830 lockers. It's a lot.
I understand.
I mean, it just seems like a lot of space and a lot of extra costs for the townspeople to fund. So I totally not on board with that. And again, there was no really question. It was really a conversation.
Thank you. One thing, it's been kind of mentioned, but to build that building there, the parking would be atrocious. You can't park on the right side of the field, on the right side of the street. There's no parking, so anyone going to use that facility would have to cross the street. And then you can see it's already dark this time of year, and it could lead to someone getting hurt. Will it definitely happen? No, but it could add to a problem. I'd like to hear from the board. Did any one of you ever say no to this plan? Did you ever sit back and say, wait, we need a field house. We don't need another meeting facility. I'd like to hear it from... I'm interested in the present plan.
That's why we got 7 or 8 plans, because we were kind of...
I'm interested in the plan as it sits now. Did any one of you still say, you know what, we're here for a field house, not a new meeting room? I'd like to hear a yay or nay from each one of you.
So I just want to say, and I want to be clear, that as board members, we're doing the best we can, right? And I know you know that. Whether we're talking about athletics, whether we're talking about the performing arts, like, we are here for the kids. We were tasked with, the field house is very old. We know we have to do something about it. So when we kind of, met as committees, we got input from, like I said, the athletic director, the coaches. We had some staff there as well. And we were tasked to design a field house that met certain needs. This is what we came back with. We know it's not that there are going to be people that are not going to vote for it. And that's your choice, and that's what a referendum is about. So I just, I want everybody to understand that, our job as board members, we listen to our stakeholders. We gave input, right? So we did have that option to put a basketball court in, which would have increased the footprint, which would have increased the amount of money that we were spending. So it's balancing, what our our coaches and our principal and our athletic director say that we need right now, or not right now, but what our kids deserve, because they deserve good facilities. And I know it's an outrageous number. I get it. Okay, but again, we're talking about brand new construction. That thing has to be ripped down, and we're making it Title IX compliant. And again, it's up to you if you want to vote for it. And we respect everybody's input and feedback here. We truly do. And a lot of good conversations and comments are coming from this meeting that we will go back and take into consideration.
Again, when I was planning projects for my working career, just because the person asked for it doesn't mean they get it. Just because the coach asked for
I understand
something,
that. I understand.
it's up to you to represent us and say, the town people are going to say no, they don't want that.
Thank you, Chris. Do you want to come up? No, I'm just kidding, Chris.
And I
You
still haven't
served
heard,
your time.
I still haven't heard a yes or no from each individual about the day.
Well, no, and as a referendum, you know, it's really like
I want to know, did anyone on the board say, guys, we were tasked with funding a field house, not a monstrosity. And again, my kids were very good in sports here, so I'm not against sports. I think what you guys did several years ago to update the Arts Center auditorium was great for kids who are into that. So I'm not against spending money, but you got to spend it wisely.
Sorry, I think there was one other person. No, was I wrong? Wait.
So I understand the cost is going to go up, but what is the upkeep of this facility? You're talking about spending $15 million. So our taxes are going to go up every single year because there is an upkeep to that new building. What is the upkeep cost going to cost the taxpayers? Because I really don't think we need a second floor. There's a cost. What is that cost going to cost us every year for operational of that building? Can somebody tell me what that is? Because you're telling me what it's going to cost me to build it. You're not telling me what it's going to cost me every year, especially since now I'm at the age that I'm becoming a senior. And I don't have children in this school system, and I support this school system. But what are you telling all the people that don't have children in the system, that our taxes are going to go up every year? What are they getting out of this? I'm asking because I've been here a really long time, and I don't have a problem paying for stuff for the children here, whether I have them or not. But you're talking about spending $15 million on a field house. And I agree. Our curriculum isn't the best. And I'm a teacher, and I teach in Elizabeth, and we're a lot in a better place than them. But I just don't understand. This is $130, correct? $130 per household? So are you telling me every year it's only going to be $130, $130 in one time, and that's it? Because the way I see it, that 130 is going to be 150 the following year. Oh, well, we need operational. What have you figured for the operational of this facility? That wouldn't be directed to you, I would assume, right?
But I can help answer it.
Okay.
And look, there's no question that when you construct something, there are operational costs that go along with it. Arguably, there are operational costs with the existing field house and the maintenance that goes along with mechanical systems breaking, toilets backing up, and the like. So, you know, I'm not going to suggest to you that there are not going to be operational costs. This particular capital fund won't change from the 130 because it can't. Will the electric bill go up a little bit? Sure. You're going to have new lights that'll be more energy efficient, but if someone leaves them on all night, you're 100% right. There's not a calculation that's been discussed right now as it relates to operational, because a referendum has to pass for that even to be a consideration. But those discussions certainly should happen, because any time that you make a building improvement, either you're potentially saving money, where if you swap out something old for something more efficient like a piece of mechanical equipment, arguably you could save some money, but I can't debate with you that there's not going to be an operational cost, but that's something that goes into the annual operating budget and goes along with the operation of this building. And the electric going up, the gas going up, salaries going up. Unfortunately, the world we live in, things, someone mentioned it, don't rarely come down.
And I understand that they don't come down, but let's look at our buildings that we're spending all this money on. And we have been spending money on these buildings, correct?
Sure.
Well, if we've been spending money and keeping things up, then why is that field house? I know it's not Title IX compliant, but why is it
speak.
For all the money that we have put into it. I
Well,
understand it's
well,
not
look, and again, I'll take the liberty of speaking for the board, and someone can smack me over the head when my time is up. At the end of the day, before Board of Educations were given an opportunity to vote in November, they were the only public entities that allowed voters to vote. And I don't know the history of this community, but typically, in my experience, when budgets are failing because people don't want their taxes to go up, the first thing to be cut are capital improvements. As an architect, I live that firsthand, not only my own community, so I can appreciate the fact that part of this, if you look back in history, that probably has some contributing factor to it. I don't think this, I can't speak to prior administrations, prior facilities, prior whatever, but again, there are typically limited resources, limited funds, and to try to keep up with tens of thousands of square feet is not easy, and up until this point, my takeaway as a third party is the field house was a very low, if no priority, because for 75 years, I've heard a lot of athletes who grew up here and who've said to me, I used that field house when I was here at the school, and it doesn't look any different. So I can't speak to your specific concerns, but they're valid. Operational is one of them. But at the end of the day, these are just the realities of the world we live in, and that's not something I control.
I understand that completely, but we're building a $15 million building. Nobody has looked into the traffic concerns. So that $15 million, I just want to know, is that going to pay for a child's life when they get killed on that street? Because I'm there. I see it all the time. And you're worried about $15 million. You have never addressed the traffic concerns, the busing coming through there. That street is not wide enough. You have parking on one side. So I get improvements, but I just want to know, are we concerned with child safety too? Because obviously where I sit, I don't see it out there. I'm being very honest.
And you mentioned that last week, and Dr. Conklin, can you speak to that, please? What we talked about last week after the concerns about children crossing over and pickups?
Yes, I know that the principal and the athletic director are going to try to address that with all the coaches and make sure we're clear that the expectation is students should not be picked up and dropped off on Westfield Avenue. And they should be either picked up on the other side of the bleachers or in the parking lot. So they're going to be working on that. I can't promise you that every parent's going to be following our requests, but we are making those requests and trying to get them to participate in that request.
You do realize the children park on Sunny, they're on Sunny Terrace. And I gotta be honest, I have children. I used to tell them you're gonna be a dead squirrel. You gotta look where you're going. But it gets a lot of traffic over there. And then you have the buses from the other teams being dropped off. Not only do they, it's dangerous because I can't even get out of my driveway because they block the driveway, which I get. I've dealt with that all my life. It does not bother me. But the kids get out. Nobody, not one coach, not one, I can tell you, we have been out there. My brother has at night put his headlights on, so no child gets killed. Not even a child. How about a parent? Stopping in the middle of the street because my kid's gotta get in the car. Happens all the time. I'm being really serious. It's very, very dangerous. So we can spend $15 million. I gotta be honest with you, $15 million, and it's gotta save a life. Because right now, somebody's gonna get hurt.
When you put the numbers up there of 130 or 140, it says per assessed value. What assessed value are you using? It's kind of important.
No,
right?
no, it's your individual homes have different assessed values.
Right.
Some homes are worth 200,000.
No,
So the average assessed home, I don't know what the average assessed home
again,
is.
But we should know that. That's
It's like 4.25-ish.
all right.
Well,
'Cause
So-
we-
so
it should be
there you
told.
go.
So if your home is much more than that, you're gonna right.
Well, yes.
You know, we're just putting a number of 130, 140 up there. We're not really telling everybody what the number.
Assessments aren't market value.
No, I understand, but each home is a different assessment.
Correct. Yeah.
So if yours is at 850, then you're paying 260.
Correct.
You know, I mean, so you should let people know that.
It's out there. You said
Yeah.
No,
average
the assessed value was not up there. It was not up there, sir. It was
We
not.
can-
It was just 140, 130.
Yeah.
So it leads people to believe
We can
it's
add
140.
into the presentation what the average assessed home is in the towns. Obviously, we can't tell you what your home is valued at, so we can add that to the presentation so people know what the average is, and then obviously people will have to do research through the tax department to see if they are below or above that. well, listen, this kind of feedback helps so we can add it. We're not looking to withhold information, but sometimes there's information that we don't think about that we can add. Well, hold on. So to play devil's advocate, it could be less than 140. It all depends on the value of your home, not the market value, because that's not tax-based, but it could be less because they get to the average by taking the lows and the highs. So arguably, half the town will pay less than the amount referenced, and half the town will pay more if you just did the simple math.
Seeing no other questions, pass it back to Vice President.
All right. So if there are no other questions, may I have a motion to conclude the public session and enter back into executive?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second
Oh, sorry.
it. I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All against, nay? Any abstentions? Motion carried.